Oklahoma, Braga, Sheffield, Jacksonville, Waterville, Costa Rica, Pittsfield, Springfield, Bakerfield, Shreveport, Hackensack, Cadillac, Fond du Lac, Davenport, Idaho, Jellicoe, Argentina, Diamond.
Thank you for coming to a super First Tuesdays.
That's correct.
I'm Mick Dumke of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Ben Joravsky of the Chicago Reader.
And hopefully, I know a lot of you have been here before. Thank you for coming back. For those who haven't been here, thank you for coming for the first time. We do this every month. The show is very creatively named First Tuesdays because we're here the first Tuesday. And we, of course, try to have a serious but also fun and free-flowing conversation about politics. And as most of you know, we usually are focusing on the misdeeds of our local officials. Most recently, it seems, ROM or RON or whatever they've done that particular month is what we're talking about. But we thought it would be appropriate and a lot of fun to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk some national politics. And so we have a couple of elected officials here, first-term aldermen who have been willing to come out, take some time out of their busy schedules, and serve as the proxy candidates for Senator Bernie Sanders and former Senator and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So Carlos Ramirez Rosa of the 35th Ward is taking on the role of Bernie tonight. And 17th Ward Alderman David Moore will be serving as Hillary Clinton's proxy tonight.
All right.
So thanks in advance to both of you guys for coming up here. And, we do want this to be participatory. So I have a bunch of questions. If anybody comes up with a question along the way, I tell you what, I'll leave the note cards right here. Just sneak on up and grab one and fill out a question, and you can hand it to me during the course of the show. We want to be respectful of the conversation we're going to have up here, but we also, again, want to keep this loose. And we may even, ask you for some questions, some impromptu questions along the way. So we are going to actually, believe it or not, have something akin to rules here. We're going to, we don't want to just make this a Twitter length responses or just bullet points, but so we're going to give you guys a little bit of time to make statements and offer back and forth responses. But I also am going to be watching a clock. So if you are, get into filibuster mode and you're going way over 2 minutes in a response, I am going to start making obscene gestures in your direction. So so keep that in mind. We want to keep this moving. And we will, like I said, ask questions from the audience. Ben and I will jump in. We'll probably ask you some follow-up questions along the way. And don't worry, the whole thing doesn't depend on you. The future of the country doesn't depend on you, although it does a little bit. So, All right. Anything else? Anything I've missed?
No, it's we're ready to go.
I've said enough. I've done my own filibustering. All right.
Yes.
Well, let's get started, and we want to get started with opening statements. And this being First Tuesdays, why don't we start with the far left?
Yes, this is First Tuesdays.
Alderman Rosa, why? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So first, we're going to go for a collegial tone because Alderman Moore is my very good friend in the city council, and I intend to keep it that way after tonight. So I support Bernie Sanders to be president of the United States because if Bernie Sanders is not the Democratic nominee, the Democratic Party is in for a very tough time come November. And if Bernie Sanders isn't the Democratic nominee that wins in November, the country is in for a very tough time for years, if not decades to come. So I want to talk about my first contention, and that is that Bernie is the most electable candidate in this race. If you look at national polls, every single national poll has Bernie Sanders beating Republican frontrunners, namely Trump, Rubio, and Cruz, by double digits. It wasn't until recently that a poll had Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump, but it's within the margin of error. So that means that if Bernie Sanders is our candidate, Democrats have a very good chance of winning in November. If Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee, then we are in for a very, very tough race. Number two, the contention that Bernie is better for the nation. And that is that we are living in a moment in time where we have income inequality that has not been seen since the 1920s. We are living in a moment in time where 1/3 of millennials are unemployed or underemployed. We're living in a moment in time when recent college graduates cannot find a job to pay the rent, let alone pay back their student loans. We have retirees who were promised that a 401k and that gambling on Wall Street would secure their retirement, but have suddenly found that they are hundreds of thousands short for a dignified retirement. And at the same moment in time that the middle class is shrinking and that the buying power of your salary is less than it has been in recent history, we have massive amounts of wealth moving to the top 1% of this country. And Bernie is the only candidate in this race that has articulated a platform that gives us a future to believe in, one in which the middle class grows, one in which people, regardless of their race and socioeconomic background, have the ability to live a dignified life. So when it comes to his proposals in terms of raising the cap on Social Security, he's the right one. So quite simply, Bernie is the right choice in terms of economics. He also is the most effective choice. He was known as the Amendment King in the U.S. House because he was just so effective at amending bills and getting things through. He was also called an effective legislator during his time in the U.S. Senate, called an effective legislator by the same mainstream media people that are now blasting him and asking how he's going to pass his proposals. And then the last thing I want to say is the grassroots support, right? So you can test a candidate's support by the wherewithal of their contributions. And if you look at Bernie, he has a whole grassroots movement that's behind him that has raised tens of millions of dollars just this month to support his campaign. And that is a really good indicator of someone that has the robust operation that will do really well in November.
All right. Thank you, Alderman. I failed miserably as a timekeeper, and you got a full extra minute. Senator Clinton, a.k.a. Alderman Moore, you have 2 minutes and 58 seconds here to offer your statement.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank you both for allowing and asking myself and Alderman Carlos Rosa to be here tonight. This is a great opportunity, and as Carlos said, as we both are members of the Progressive Caucus in City Council, we work well together. We're friends, and I like what he's doing in the City Council, and to keep an independent mind, an independent voice, and the same thing that I definitely try to do as well. The president of this hideout talked about starting out, when he was talking about Carlos starting out young, and that's the thing, a lot of us started out young in politics. I was introduced to politics at the age of 11 after my aunt and uncle moved my mom and my sisters out of the projects of Chicago and into their basement two-flat in Inglewood, and I actually thought I moved to the suburbs when I moved to Inglewood. And so my uncle was an assistant precinct captain, and he would pay me $5 just to go up and down the street putting flyers in the mailbox. And trust me, you all, I didn't care nothing about politics. I just wanted a Buzz Daddy, Boston baked beans, and some Yoo-Hoo potato chips. But it was when I heard Harold Washington speak when he was running for Congress at this time when I was 13, and the things that he said changed my life. And at that point, that $5 no longer became important to me. It was serving people. And that's why I'm supporting Hillary Clinton. See, at 16, we had the foundation of our parents and everything. That was our guide. And as the president said, she was a Barry Goldwater supporter. But it says something about the foundation of parents who allowed a youth pastor to allow her to go see Dr. King speak. And when she heard Dr. King speak, that changed her life. And that changed the trajectory of her life to really focusing on people. That was in the 60s. In the 70s, she went to go work with the, I think, the Children's Fund. And she raised awareness in South Carolina for juveniles who was being incarcerated with adults, being raped with adults. These issues are the foundation. So I always tell people, what is the foundation like? Bernie Sanders, who I think is a wonderful person and is saying all the right things, his foundation, I'm sure, was good too. But when he said, I marched for Dr. King, and I heard Dr. King speak, did it change the trajectory of his life? Personally, I don't think so when you went to all Vermont to run for Congress. To run for mayor and then to run in Congress. So my thing is, what is the foundation of a person? And the other thing, I'm not good at politics real well. I look at what can people do. And as I begin to wrap up, one thing I want to say about Hillary and the Clintons as a whole, there's intangible assets that people have that can get things done versus that other people don't have. And that's real. That is not about politics. That's real. So they have intangible assets that will get things moved as president in the House and in the Senate that I feel that Bernie Sanders, although he's excited about and saying the things, that he will not be able to get moved. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Actually, Mick, I have to, before we go to the questions, I knew this would happen. I'd hear something and I'd have to ask a follow-up. So this relates to something, Carlos, that you said, and it shows the vast difference in age between you and me. You said, and you're speaking as a millennial, that Bernie was the most electable candidate. I've been struggling with these issues. I feel the burn in many ways, but I'm an old person feeling the burn, and I remember very clearly the 1972 presidential election when George McGovern, who was sort of the Bernie Sanders of his day, was annihilated by Richard Nixon's Republican machine that convinced a vast majority of people in this country that George McGovern was some sort of dastardly communist threat to our entire existence. So, what makes you so confident that the same thing won't happen again in 2016 should Bernie Sanders be the Democratic nominee?
Sure. Well, things have changed a lot since you were millennial, Ben. But that could be said any point in time, right?
Hey, that was a long time ago.
But this election is going to be very different from 2008, right? And 2008 was very different, vastly different from races before then. But the one thing that we have to look at is data, right? And we know that at this point in time, no Democrat wins the White House without certain key demographics, right? Number one, that's African Americans. Number two, Latinos. 3, women. But 4, young voters, right? We need those 4 key demographics to come out in mass if we are going to take the White House. We know that exit polls and entry polls in Nevada show quite decisively that Bernie Sanders won the Latino vote. We know that that black voters are going to come out overwhelmingly for the Democratic nominee, right? Whether that be Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. But we need the millennial enthusiasm, right? And that is critical, right? We need millennials to come out in mass. And right now, Hillary is not attracting the millennials for very good reasons, right? And that's because, Alderman Moore talked about that Hillary changed her trajectory after hearing Dr. King speak. Well, she's changed her trajectory so many times that for people that are really at the bottom of this economic system, right, people that have bet everything on this college degree and are suddenly finding out that, guess what, it's not a ticket to the middle class and they're going to work at Jimmy John's, right, and not get $15 an hour, not get a living wage, right, and they're going to have to live in poverty, $40 an hour. By the way, Hillary only wants $12 an hour. She thinks they're worth 12. Bernie thinks they're worth 15. But the point here is that millennials are not excited about her. And so there's this enthusiasm problem when it comes to Hillary Clinton. But also, we need to look at the polls, right? We have really good data. Polling is very different now than it was decades ago. And all the polls consistently tell us that Bernie is the best candidate to go head-to-head with any of the Republican frontrunners.
Okay, well, David, how do you respond to that? Do you think Bernie is more electable than Hillary?
Absolutely not. First of all, and when we're dealing with the numbers, I remember me graduating from Western Illinois University with my accounting degree, and I was going to interview in corporate America, and my teacher said, now, David, listen, when you go interview, I'm reminded of this story, so I want you to listen. And she said, what's 2 plus? This guy went for an interview, And the interviewer asked him, what's 2 plus 2? He said 4. And he said, thank you, I'll call you later, and put his resume in the garbage can. The other guy came behind him and said, what's 2 plus 2? And the guy said 4. He said, thank you so much, we'll be giving you a call. He left out, and he put his resume in the garbage can. And the third guy came and said, and he asked him, what's 2 plus 2? He said, anything you want it to be. He said, you're hired. So at the end of the day, numbers can say anything they want to say. What I do is I touch and I see how people are feeling. I get to that ground floor, and I swear I've never gotten a poll call. And many people in the African-American community and many other communities, many people of different religions, remember people of different, whether it's male or female, genders, have not gotten those phone calls. And so when I don't live by polls. If I lived by polls, I probably wouldn't be alderman right now, and both Alderman Rosa and I won without runoff elections. But the poll says something different. And so at the end of the day, we have to be able to touch people, and that's what Hillary does. She touched people. Now, the millennials, oh, I am so excited that they're involved now. My part of me, I'm excited for Bernie, because now he's helped bring millennials to the table. Now when they're at the table, now all we have to do is guide them, because a lot of, like everybody that's young, including myself, knowledge without wisdom is like sand and water. And so we have to take our youth and then begin to guide them, because what they're going on sometimes is what? Emotions. And it sounds emotional when I can promise you this, promise you that, but can I deliver? And the answer to that is no. And because he cannot deliver and Hillary can, that is what makes her more electable.
All right. Thank you, Alderman. Someone clapped. Okay. All right. We probably have a few more Bernie people in the audience, I'm guessing, than Clinton people, but that's why we do this. All right. All right. Well, let's ask the first question from the audience here is sort of a red meat question for a good Democrat. Most states run by the GOP are playing by the same playbook. Cut pensions, break up unions, cut staff. What can you do to stop this? In other words, what can you do if you're elected president to fight back against the GOP agenda, not just in Congress, but potentially at the state level? Alderman Moore?
Well, I think what Hillary, she's been a fighter for the unions. That's number one. She's always stood with working people. And so some of the things that she can do is put money really in states to help bring jobs back here. Now, when you're talking about bringing jobs back to Illinois, and she does have an economic plan to put money into our community and do redevelopment, especially in blighted areas that are needed throughout the state of Illinois, not just in Chicago, but throughout the state of Illinois and throughout the other states. So when you put that money here and you begin to bring those jobs back and bring jobs to our communities, it's hard to fight. And especially when you got a Republican governor, to fight against someone delivering for people who are in the union, for people who are out of the union, and for people who are fighting for their pension. And so we have to continue to bring economic development here, and I think she has the ability to do that. She has the relationships. Again, sometimes it's about knowing where the body is buried. Sometimes it's about knowing what other people, whatever somebody else knows. And so I'm sure, and this goes back to intangibles, I guarantee you Hillary knows someone that knows Ronner, that if you go about to pull a trigger, she said, you think he probably want to do that? Do you remember in 19? And they'll hold back. I'm a realist to this, and these things happen for real. It happens in city government, it happens in state government, and it definitely happens at the federal government level.
Thank you, Alderman.
So to answer your question, Bernie Sanders will champion the Employee Free Choice Act. The Employee Free Choice Act is an excellent piece of legislation that will ensure that workers have the rights that they need to form a union in their workplace. It's a bill sponsored by the AFL-CIO. It needs to happen. But to respond to some of the things that Alderman Moore has said, you know, what will Hillary get moved? Right? You tell me, okay, well, Hillary has a connection. She knows where the bodies are buried. She's friends with all the rich bankers and the big corporations. She can pick up the phone and probably get Rupert Murdoch to pick up. What does that do for working people, right? What will she deliver on? Because quite frankly, we don't need another NAFTA, right? We need a president who's going to work to repeal NAFTA, not a president that's going to say we're going to have more free trade deals, we're going to have more neoliberal policies shoved down your throat. And so I think that the Democratic Party must continue to be the party of yes, we can, not no, we can't. And that's the cynicism of the Hillary Clinton campaign, is that she's saying, no, you can't have these things. You can't have universal health care. You can't have a $15 minimum wage. You can't have free college tuition. You can't have a dignified retirement. That's not the Democratic Party that I, nor millennials, nor working people across this country want to be part of. And so I think that the danger here is that if we elect Hillary Clinton, oh yeah, she's going to be effective at keeping the status quo. And that is the danger. Because if Hillary Clinton is the candidate of the status quo, then Donald Trump, with his fascist ideology, is the candidate of change. And people will gravitate towards that. Because if you listen to what Donald Trump is saying, he's saying, let's stop free trade policies, right? He's saying, let's tax China. Let's close the border. So Donald Trump is speaking to the anger that American workers are feeling right now because they've been ripped off and fleeced for 30-odd some years. And he's telling them, hate immigrants, hate Muslims, right? Bernie articulates what's really happening, and that's that corporations, billionaires, the 1%, the same people that have made Hillary Clinton the rich woman that she is today, they're the problem. And so I don't need someone that has really close relationships with Bruce Rauner. I need someone who has relationships with people on the ground, and that's exactly the types of relationship Bernie has.
Okay, wait. Follow up. Follow up for both gentlemen. I'll start with Carlos. And this notion had emerged for something that David said. What makes you think that Bernie Sanders will be able to deliver on his promises and his programs? We're right now at a situation where Republicans control both houses. I presume they're going to definitely control the House afterwards because it's so gerrymandered. Right. Maybe if Trump gets the nomination, the Democrats will take over the Senate. But what makes you think that Bernie, I mean, it's so tough for Barack Obama to get things through.
Sure.
What makes you think that Bernie, who's more radical than Barack, could get his program?
So I think of something that FDR said in his first inauguration, and he said, I hope that it will be said in my first term that the bankers have met their match, and that in my second term they have met their master. And right after that, what did he do? He passed dozens and dozens of executive orders, right? And he didn't say, I'm not going to wait for Congress. We're in a crazy crisis. I've been elected to get things done. And so Bernie has made it very clear that he will not shy away from executive orders, right? He doesn't need the Republican-controlled legislature to move things. But second of all, Bernie understands that it's going to take a grassroots nationwide movement. And that's what he's building right now. And we see the signs of that being built through the massive numbers of small contributions he has received from people across the country, but also we see that in the manner in which he has run his campaign, right? He's not just co-opting Black Lives Matter. He's not just co-opting and hiring undocumented activists. He's actually empowering them to be integral parts of his campaign. So his immigration platform was written by a leading undocumented activist, right? So when Bernie says we're going to work for these things, it's because he has actually made his campaign an extension of undocumented leaders who have been fighting on the ground, building those relationships, right? If you saw Erica Gardner and how the daughter of Eric Gardner, who was murdered, if you saw the video where she endorses him, she talks about how he basically empowered her to tell her message and tell her story. And so he has brought the grassroots movements across this country for social and economic justice, brought them into his campaign and made his campaign an extension of that. And he knows that that coalition is going to be integral to pushing things through. So he's going to use executive authority. He's going to call upon his grassroots support to move things and put that on the ground pressure. But third of all, we have to look at the history, right? And he was called the Amendment King. He was called an effective legislator because he has passed and moved more things than Hillary Clinton. So if we want to look at that alone, he has the track record of actually getting things done.
Alderman Moore,
So
working with Congress, the last Clinton administration didn't always have an easy time of it in Congress either. So how would Hillary advance her agenda?
Well, first of all, we talk about, and I'll answer that question, but when people throw out NAFTA and with Hillary wasn't president. Her husband was. And when you think about it, it was Bernie Sanders who voted for it. Now, at least Bill Clinton has come out and apologized and said what I did in terms of that, not NAFTA, I'm sorry, with the crime bill, in terms of incarcerating young black men. And Bill Clinton came out and apologized for that and said what he did was wrong. I respect that. Didn't like what he did, but there was something about that in what he did, is that he apologized. Bernie never said, I apologize for voting for it. So for me, that concerns me in terms of your position on certain issues. Now, Hillary, I believe that when you talk about executive orders and just passing executive orders, now you're talking about a Supreme Court then making decisions on our government. I'm glad Rahm Emanuel don't have a whole bunch of executive orders, because we'll may be in trouble in some cases. And that's why you don't want to take the voice of the people away. And that's why I appreciate a Hillary Clinton who can advocate for the people. And by advocating for the people, you have to work on both sides of the aisle. One thing I learned coming from the south side of Chicago and going down to West Illinois University, there are different people that's fighting for different things. And those things are important to them. So although I may be a Democrat and somebody may be a Republican, the issues in terms of sometimes what we're trying to get to can be obtained by sometimes just, we may have to sacrifice on both ends sometimes. And that's how we get things done. And to do just straight executive orders is not beneficial and not helpful to our country. And by Hillary Clinton being able to work on both sides of the aisle, being able to, it's important to have relationships. We're all about relationships in life, whether it's your daughter, whether it's your mother, whether it's your neighbor. Life is about relationships. And if you don't have good relationships, you cannot move things forward. And Hillary makes the difference in moving things in Congress because she does have the relationships. And I truly believe she'll be able to do it.
All right, thank you. You mentioned the Supreme Court. Funny, you should bring that up because there's a question about it. Please share the names of people you would nominate to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I'm not sure if you guys in the city council so far have vetted a lot of Supreme Court candidates. But so let me open up the question a little bit. What type of justices would you nominate, and how would you get them through, potentially Republican-controlled Senate committee?
I want a justice of somebody a Supreme Court justice who, first of all, number one, looks at the law, but also have compassion with the law. There are so many things that come straight forward from Supreme Court justice that's based on ideology. This is my ideology. I stick to it. That's it. I need people looking at things, not passing something because it's totally liberal and not passing something because it's so and pro-conservative, but and looking at America as a whole and saying, how does this issue advance America? And that's the type of Supreme Court person that I want to appoint to the bench.
Are there particular justices that you hold up as a model? Anybody on the bench?
Well, Sandra Day O'Connor, everybody hold up as a perfect model. If you give me another Sandra Day O'Connor, I'm fine.
All right.
Sure. So I think we need a justice that views the Constitution as a living document, that understands that the founding fathers, as it were, understood that our government needs to be able to transform to line up with the times. And to that extent, I think that we would look for a justice that has shown that in their previous rulings, right, as a appellate court judge, and someone that we know ultimately is acting to ensure that we are bringing more people into a system that promotes justice for everyone. Now, as for specific names of someone to nominate right now, I can't tell you that.
You can't or you won't? Yeah, just kidding. Very quickly, since we are keeping things loose, our good friend Ken Davis wanted to pass on some news, and this could be good or bad for your particular candidate. But what's the latest, Ken?
Well, good news for Bernie Sanders. He's won Vermont.
Bernie Sanders won Vermont. I think the good news is that he didn't lose Vermont.
Right.
But
Keep going.
Yeah. What other results do you have?
Hillary Clinton. These are all projections with 10% in or so, but the 8 o'clock Eastern returns are starting to come in now. Clinton has taken Georgia with 102 delegates. Clinton has taken Tennessee with 67 delegates. She has taken Virginia with 95, and she's taken Alabama.
Okay, so in case you didn't hear that, southern or mid-states, Tennessee, Virginia, Alabama, and Georgia all appear to be in Clinton's camp.
Similarly for Trump, Trump has projected in Tennessee, Massachusetts, Georgia, and Alabama.
Wow.
And it looks like maybe there's a close one in Virginia.
So
Rubio might pull out.
Rubio? Okay.
So far, Trump has pretty much swept what's in on the Republican side, except perhaps for Rubio. Well, there's a question from the audience that is pertinent to these results, and that is, sort of what happens next if your candidate doesn't win the nomination. And right now, just based on numbers, the prognostications are that the climb is more uphill for Senator Sanders. But if your candidate doesn't win the election, will you go to work for your opponent in the primary, and or will your candidate go to work for the opponent in the primary? And do you think your supporters will go along? There's been a lot. What the question we have here is that there's been a lot of chatter in social media, particularly from the Bernie side, saying it's our guy or I'm sitting this one out. So what do you think happens if your candidate doesn't win the nomination? I think it's your turn first.
Sure.
Alderman Rosen.
So what happens is that Hillary will become the nominee, and we will lose, and we will have a President Trump. And we know that because we look at the polls. We know that because that's what the polls tell us. And we will fight. I will definitely fight to elect Hillary Clinton. But the reality is that when you look at the polling, people do not trust her. And they do not trust her because she has transformed year after year after year. And so the thing is here, people want a candidate that they can trust. Elections are about choices. They want authenticity. This is an anti-establishment year. If Hillary Clinton is our nominee, she is the candidate of the status quo. Donald Trump becomes the candidate of change. And that's the moment at which we lose. So I will fight for her. I will work for her. I will vote for her, but ultimately my belief is that we will lose. And that is why I'm so adamant that we need a transformative candidate like Bernie Sanders. And I want to address one thing that Alderman Moore keeps saying is that she can work on both sides of the aisle, that she will get things done. No evidence has been presented that shows that she can get things done. The reality is that Bernie Sanders has passed more bills than Senator Clinton. If she can get things done, why didn't she get things done when she was in the U.S. Senate? And the other thing I want to say, too, is that if the claim is she can get things done because of her connections, well, what will she be able to get done, right? And so if it's this neoliberal policy, if it's more Republican-like policies, I'm not necessarily sure I want to get those things done. And so I just want to know, what is it that that Hillary Clinton can get done? How is she going to get that done? Because you keep telling me she's going to get things done, but you're not telling me why. And if past this prologue, the past shows that Bernie has had a better track record of getting things done.
Okay, Alderman Moore, you can certainly address that. But our other question, of course, was if, despite Senator Clinton's apparent wins tonight, if she ends up losing the nomination, will you support Senator Sanders' campaign and encourage and push your supporters to do the same?
Well, I was looking at the news today, and they were saying if anybody else was going to get in the race, they had to get in today, I think. So I think that may or may not count Bloomberg out. I don't know, because I think Bloomberg was testing the waters to see if Hillary was not the nominee and Trump and Bernie ended up being the nominee, that he would get in the race. And so if that was still an option, I'll have to wait and see, if that would happen. and before I make any type of decision at that time. So we'll see. But I plan on, I don't think I'll be in that position, so I don't have to, worry about that, and I will be the nominee. And when I become the nominee, I trust America enough that they will look and see, look at the things that are important. People talk about trust, and when you see people interviewing and they say, "Why don't you trust Hillary?" They bring up emails, and that's media stuff. That's media pushing that. At the end of the day, an email is not going to put food on your table. At the end of the day, email is not going to give you a job with working livable wages. And so America is going to look beyond the lies and the false advertisements and say, we want someone who can move us along, because she can work on both sides of the aisles. She knows the issues, and she can get things done. And that's what I know. It won't be in a situation where we have a stagnant government. And so because of that, I don't think I have to worry about electing anybody else but myself.
Right.
I had a thought here that based on something that was apparent from the results that Ken reported, which is following a pattern here, and that is whenever we reach a state that has a significant number of black voters in it, Hillary wins. And so my question is for both of you, but I guess are we following a rotation here? But what is it about the Democratic Party right now that there seems to be this split between the quote-unquote progressive faction of the Democratic Party and the black faction of the Democratic Party? That split wasn't so apparent, obviously, when Barack Obama was running in 2008, but we see it now, particularly in these early primaries. So do we go to David first?
I think so.
Okay.
That's a very good question. And believe it or not, the split was somewhat there in 2008. It just wasn't as high, but it was there. People, I'm an African American, and I'm also in the Progressive Caucus, and my votes, the way I vote, I sometimes I swing this way, I swing that way, because it's not always just progressive. It's about what can you get done for the least of them? What can you get done for the average person? What can you get done for the working poor? And people, especially African Americans, have been finally getting tired of and getting wise to we steady voting, but there's no growth in economic development. There's no growth in jobs, and so it's becoming that push with more or less partially the millennials who have come up in a society that wasn't so much just we're going to vote Democrat no matter what, and then the older progressive who, okay, we want to push progressive issues, but we're going to stick with our democratic values. So we're not prone to, and I've never been prone to just stick with the Democratic Party. And so you go with people who's doing the best for our country, people who's looking at everyone, because we're all different in different ways. And if you're just liberal, you just don't push liberal ideas. You try to somehow come to the middle of the road. And I think because this country is the middle of the road, and Hillary is a moderate. She's not so far to the left that she cannot work with moderate people.
Carlos?
Sure. So I don't think it's a split between the progressive faction and the black faction of the Democratic Party. I think it's more so that voting is relational, right? And people need to know who you are. And the Clintons for years have built a relationship with the black community and courted the black community as a key demographic of the winning Democratic coalition. And so black voters know the Clinton name. They know that at a time when things were looking really rough in the wake of Reaganomics, that the Clintons were there courting them and building a relationship with them. And I think that is why Hillary is doing so well amongst the black electorate. They just don't know who Bernie is, right? Bernie's with the granola white people up in Vermont. No offense to the granola white people, I love them. Yeah. But that's where he's at, right? So black voters don't know him, and unfortunately, he doesn't have a super PAC, right? He's funded by the people, not the billionaires, and so it's difficult for his message to break through. It's especially difficult for him to break through when you have so-called left-wing media like MSNBC completely ignoring this race. I stopped watching MSNBC. Right? Because they're ignoring this race. They're not talking about what's happening. Of course, CNN and Fox News are no better. And so, the corporate media that is owned by GE or other large corporations, they're not giving Bernie the coverage that he should be getting. And so, in effect, what you have is that Bernie is just outgunned. But the reality here is that, Bernie ultimately will be the better candidate for all working people, right? If we're looking at what's the best choice for the least of these, for working people, whether it be black, Latino, ultimately Bernie Sanders is the best choice because he has the strongest economic platform, right? He has the clearest sense of how we get out of this economic rut and really get people back to work. And one thing I want to, since we're talking on black voters, I want to speak on Latino voters. I think one of the reasons why Bernie Sanders in exit polls won the Latino vote in Nevada is that Hillary Clinton said that we should deport refugee children. And when she was questioned about that at a recent debate, instead of walking back that position, she doubled down. I will not blame my community for rejecting a candidate who feels that children from Latin America that are fleeing violence from cartels and gangs should be deported to teach the parents a lesson. And so that's why I say that Bernie's more electable, because at the end of the day, I think that Latino voters and millennials, a lot of them, and we're seeing it on social media, they're going to sit this one out if Hillary's the nominee. I think that black voters, by and large, for the most part, will stick with the Democratic nominee. But I do think that there's an enthusiasm problem for Hillary Clinton, which means that she's ultimately less electable. And the polls show that, right? Only one poll, and that was in the last couple days, shows her beating Donald Trump. And it is by by 3 points, which is within the margin of error.
Okay. Well, let's get back to the issues. I do think that in order to prepare for, since we're keeping things loose, in order to sort of prepare on my end for this, I actually hadn't seen the last debate, and I'm enough of a geek that I watched the whole thing on YouTube over the weekend. And they did have a back and forth about that very issue, about the deportation thing, and I think they both accused each other of misstating their positions, just for the record on that. But anyway, all right, what reforms would you implement now to fix our broken criminal justice system? This has obviously been a huge issue in Chicago and around the country. I think we're up to you, Carlos. I think it's your turn to go first.
Okay. So I think that Bernie has done a great job of bringing in leaders from the Black Lives Matter movement and empowering them to ensure that we have a holistic justice system that ensures that nobody is treated unfairly. I would be remiss to say that I know his criminal justice platform like the back of my hand, because I don't. But I do know that some of the things that he wants to do is he wants to ensure that we are decriminalizing marijuana, that we are legalizing marijuana, that we are decriminalizing other drug infractions which are responsible for the massive growth in our criminal justice system. And I also know that he wants to stop detaining immigrant families. So one of the major growths in the private prison industry has been in detaining immigrant families. He wants to stop that practice. And he also wants to make sure that there are no private prisons. So if we look at how laws have changed in order to drive people into jail, it has occurred because there is a massive profit incentive, right? We have private prisons that are run for profit, and we have legislators that are on the make with those private prison corporations who are changing the law. So I think that ultimately what Bernie's going to ensure is that we have less people in jail, and he's also going to ensure that we're not locking people up for silly things like having, a gram of pot or something like that. And I think that that's critically important if we're going to reform the system.
Thank you. Alderman?
Well, definitely Hillary wants to end the school-to-prison pipeline, which is very important. And she'll do that by providing $2 billion of support to schools, districts to improve school climates, and reform. We have to everything begins at the education level. People look, and they look at kids by the 3rd grade, whether they are going to be in prison or whether they're going to be productive in society. And so it starts at the education level. And by Hillary Clinton putting $2 billion into education so that we can begin to focus on school reform, focus on early childhood development and learning so that we do not reach that that school to prison pipeline, to eliminate that. I think that's where it starts. So you have to begin to do some proper funding of education. The other part is to stop this mass incarceration with mandatory minimums. And so she wants to definitely eliminate that and work with our reentry program. So as people come out of jail, put money behind those programs to take those men who are coming out of jail, making sure that they're getting jobs, because someone's changed their life around and they have a record, but they can't get a job. What happens? They go back into the system that who's paying for? The taxpayers. How they say, 3 hots in a cot? You know, so at the end of the day, Hillary has to be the one that we look at to make sure that we stop this school to prison pipeline and that we stop this mass incarceration that's costing taxpayers money but making millionaires who's investing in private prisons richer.
All right, thank you. I'm going to throw this question out also from the audience that is actually about something under your purview in your day jobs. The question is, what will it take to get an independent review organization for the Chicago Police Department that can actually fire or charge cops? And we've all been following, of course, what's been happening around here. And I myself have written several stories where, based on emails at City Hall among the mayor and his staff, they are discussing what the supposedly independent police review authority is doing as it's investigating first the Laquan McDonald shooting and then more recently the LaGreer Jones shooting that happened the day after Christmas, where they're basically like checking in on IPRA to see what it's up to. And this is the organization that's supposed to be, again, independently looking into these cases. So you guys, as aldermen, people are curious, is this something that's still on your it's still sort of on your radar, and what, if anything, can be done? Because the mayor has made a bunch of promises to review some of this, right?
Well, right now, I will give Sharon Fairley a chance. My whole thing...
and she's the new head of IPRA.
And you want it... You will want it to be controlled at the end of the day and be independent by whether it's groups, non-appointed by the mayor. That's my preference. But unfortunately, we live in a city where that's not the case right now, and it's going to take more people. As we in City Council continue to push that, or a few of us anyway, it's going to take the people out here to help push that and raise that up. But for me, what will tell me that the mayor and that Sharon is serious about IPRA is for them to hire Lorenzo Davis as an investigator. And if you hire Lorenzo Davis, the person who was fired as a head investigator, who wanted to look at complaints and saying, hey, this police did bad, and then he was fired because he would not change his stance and his position on them. You get people in there like that, then I know you're serious. If you're not willing to hire a Lorenzo Davis who wants to come back, I'm hearing, who is applied, I'm hearing, if you're not looking at him and you're not wanting to hire Lorenzo Davis, then I don't take you serious about IPRA.
And Lorenzo Davis was, again, the guy who was at IPRA, an investigator who was forced out after he recommended that a couple police officers be fired for their role in shootings, and was ordered to change the conclusions of his reports, and then ultimately was ousted. So
as I understand it, there are 3 ordinances right now that would change the way in which we do police accountability. The first one is the Fair Cops Ordinance. That ordinance would create an auditor that would be placed on top of IPRA that would look at decision that IPRA is making, would look at the manner in which different data that's coming out of IPRA and kind of looking at trends. The second one is a civilian police review authority. That would create an elected body of individuals for each police district, 24 in total in the city of Chicago, that would have the power and authority to discipline police officers, to rewrite the rule book, and that's the one that I prefer. I think that there has to be some work into how that is structured, but I definitely love the thought of the community electing individuals that are then hold the police accountable. And then the third one would put the Office of the Inspector General over IPRA, so similar to the Fair Cops Ordinance. My understanding is that the current Inspector General, Joe Ferguson, has said that he's not interested in having oversight over IPRA. So I'm currently looking at all three of those proposals. I know my colleagues in the Progressive Caucus are as well. I have a preference towards a civilian elected body that holds our police accountable.
Well, as long as we're brought Chicago into this discussion, and I have you here, let me ask you a question about my peculiar obsession, or one of them. So, with Bernie Sanders, we have definitely left of center political campaign that has really inspired many people. There's no doubt about that, and has forced, to a certain degree, Hillary to move a little to the left to try to convince Bernie's people that she is cut from the same cloth. So here's my question. If we have such a progressive movement nationwide that could gather close to half the vote in Democratic primaries, what's the matter with Chicago? What's our problem? We keep electing year after year the same old, like Mitt Romney types. I'm not blaming you or you. I'm just asking, why do we have a national party that is so far to the left of where our local party is, and we are probably one of the most liberal cities, at least in our voting patterns, in the country? Why? What's this peculiarity? What's the matter with Chicago?
Am I supposed to answer that?
I don't know.
So I think I can talk about what I'm doing, and that's that we're building an independent political organization in the 35th Ward that aspires to hold not just me accountable, but also to be a force to be reckoned with. Just like FDR said, I hope that they'll say that in my first term, the bankers met their match. I hope that it'll be said that the IPOs that are springing up right now in the 25th Ward, the 35th Ward, that they will be the match to the corporations and to the very rich who have placed their people in city government. And that means that we need to build people power. And that means that, one, we need good candidates to run. Because I can tell you that there's a lot of vulnerable aldermen out there, but the right people aren't running. Two, we need to make sure that we're out there knocking doors. The machine is dead. It's gone. The precinct captains, they're super old. No, I love my elders, but let me tell you something. They're phoning it in. They're not knocking the doors like they used to anymore, okay? So if you get 15, 20, 30 of your friends together, like-minded folks, and go knock doors, and you're disciplined about it, and you talk to your neighbors, you can win that election. But that means having the right organization. That means having the right candidate. And if you want to talk to me about that, I'll be around afterwards. So
what's the matter with Chicago?
I think for years, Chicago has been unique in itself, and especially with the way people have voted. And it's like, okay, they stuck with the party machine for years. And when you get people who have gotten in office because they care more about the seat than they care about people, and then they get there and they compromise themselves. And so it's compromised such in a sense that the moment they get there, they're looking at the next 4 years. Good example. When the mayor introduced his budget when we first got in office, not only did the administration say, and the mayor himself said it as well, so I just say the mayor, because he did say it, another alderman said is that an alderman has never lost a vote voting for a policy. Never lost an election voting for a policy issue. Follow me. An alderman has never lost I've never known an alderman lose an election based on a policy. Your job is to just take care of your community, and that's what's going to get you back in office. I was slightly offended by that statement because, in other words, I'm supposed to just come in this office, vote for anything, and as long as I take care of my ward so I can worry about getting elected in 4 years. That's been a problem, and that's why I appreciate an Alderman Carlos Rosa like myself. We care about people first. And when we look at it, we'll go against the issues as well, even if it's threats to, as people had told me, if you don't do this, you won't get your trees cut. You won't get this cut. You won't get this done. Well, I can say I voted, and I know the alderman has voted against certain policies that we did not feel was right for our communities, but yet my trees are still getting cut because we stay on top of those things. And so you have to find candidates, first of all, who tell the truth and who do not. And you'll know they're telling the truth because they'll say things that, man, he said that's going to cost him an election because he's standing on what's right. I've seen Carlos Rosa do that. I've done that. And I don't care about the seat as much as I care about the people. As long as I can get up and look in the mirror every day and say I did the right thing by constituents, then if I lose 4 years from now, be it, for standing on the truth. And I think we're getting more candidates and more people now to say, wait, that's not the usual politician I'm used to. And so I believe the tide is turning, and then before and in years past, that wasn't that way. People were saying, man, I got to get reelected in 4 years. And they were looking for people to give them money or give them foot soldiers. Right now, it's people are listening, and they're looking at the Carlos Rosas of the world. They're looking at the David Moore of the world, and we are going to make a difference in that city council.
All right. Since we're on the subject of Chicago and Soviet-style governments, there's a question. What about the policy of pushing NATO closer to Russia's border? You guys have any thoughts on on NATO? I know you really prepared for this one. Why don't we, in fairness, broaden it a little bit? Foreign policy. What does a foreign policy look like under a President Hillary Clinton?
A foreign policy doesn't look divisive. It looks at bringing our allies that we have traditionally supported closer to us, be it bringing Israel back with closer ties, and being also standing strong against Russia. I think that's what a foreign policy looks like. It looks like a person like a Hillary Clinton who's been able to get out there, who was able to keep America strong among other countries as Secretary of State. And so as long as we have somebody like that who understands our foreign leaders, understands the impact of doing certain things in a region as a whole before making a move and thinking about the long-term impacts, then I think we'll have a person that can keep us strong, keep us safe, and keep us as a strong power in this world. And that's what's important. People right now want to feel safe, and I know that Hillary Clinton can provide that.
So I will say, there's a ton of political scientists and researchers and professors who posit that the role of the American president historically has been to make the world safe for American capitalism, and that historically the United States president has always acted to defend the interests of American capitalism, to ensure that the ports are open for business, that people are playing ball with U.S. corporations. In this neoliberal world, right, where corporations have gone global, where we have an elite 1% who have more in common with each other globally than they do with the people in their nation, the question that I have to bring forth is, why do we still have such a large army? right? It's not like Russia's suddenly going to say, hey, guys, we're Soviets now, and we're not going to do business with you, right? We have people that are moving their wealth out of the United States abroad, right? We had the other day a man who rescinded his U.S. citizenship, right, because he didn't want to pay U.S. taxes, and he was a billionaire. So my sense here is that we are spending way too much money on our U.S. military, and I think that Bernie has made it very clear that we will not have an interventionist U.S. military when he is president of the United States, that we will ensure that our resources are well spent, and that we are not interceding in countries and toppling governments or causing strife in foreign nations just because we want to look for oil or just because we want to ensure that the interests of American capital are protected in that country. And one thing I would be remiss if I didn't say, Bernie had the judgment to vote against the Iraq war. Hillary supported it, and she hasn't apologized for that one. So I just want to say it's about judgment, and I think that Bernie has shown that he has the judgment to put America first, to ensure that, one, we're keeping our folks safe, but that we're not using the U.S. stick to force our worldview or to force our economic system down people's throats.
All right. We got a few minutes left here, and there are a couple of other questions about Chicago and state politics. So
you guys can't help yourselves.
We can't. Neither can our audience here. Why did Chuy Garcia endorse Michael Madigan? If anybody missed that, we've had former mayoral candidate, county commissioner, former mayoral candidate Chuy Garcia has been on the stage with us before, and of course, has sort of been one of the local voices, I would say, over the last year or so on progressive issues, progressive politics, and it surprised a lot of people, I think, to see him coming out and endorsing the House Speaker in a state legislative district down on the Southwest side. So why did he do that? Any thoughts on that?
I'm not going to speculate. I will say that there is a Crain's article where there's some speculation that has taken place. I recommend that you read that. But the one thing I will say is that why did Michael Madigan need Chuy Garcia's endorsement? And to me, that shows that he's in a real tough spot, and maybe 2 years down the line, I'm actually kind of scared about saying this right now, but maybe 2 years down the line, we got to make sure that there's a real progressive candidate there who we can back up and say, hey, this isn't a person that has dubious ties to Rauner, because it looks like the guy's vulnerable.
David, any additional thoughts on this?
Just on the things that I've been reading, and I do not know the Madigan's opponent very well. Somebody can give me some insight on him. So I can only...
He's backed by Rauner.
He denies that.
Someone chiming in that he's backed by Rauner, and Ben noting.
And so
I'm
I'm careful with when people say somebody is backed by somebody, and when you say backed by somebody, it's in terms of especially financial. Okay, I know a lot of times we look at financial. I have a friend that's in the race now. Who's receiving some Rauner monies. And when advertisers talk about, oh, he's the Rauner guy, he's backed by Rauner, when I know this man's heart from his childhood to even now, and that I know he cares about the least of them. I know he comes from that environment. But sometimes we was having this conversation where we've had a Democratic governor and a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate before Rauner, and things did not get done. And so when you have to look at the person and look at the issues, and not so much always look at money. I go back to old Harold Washington days. Take the money, take the chicken, and vote for me. And so you sometimes have to move forward and show where have you stood, where have your foundation, what's your foundation, what have you been doing in the past. I don't know the history of Mike Madigan's candidate, and if his history has a history of not fighting for the least of them, not fighting for the working poor, that's probably a reason why Chuy Garcia has endorsed him. And so until I have enough information about this other candidate besides being backed by Rauner, I cannot speculate on why Chuy Garcia supported Madigan over him.
Ben, do you want to chime in on this at all? I know you've been.
Oh my God, this is
paying
one of my
attention
favorite
to this.
topics. We're really deviating from Sanders versus Clinton. Although I would assume that both Sanders and Clinton would be opposed to Bruce Rauner. I think the issue is this, and I want to put it to you guys. Do you view the threat that Bruce Rauner presents to public institutions, particularly our public schools, as so dangerous, as so real, and so palpable, that we have no choice at this time but to support Mike Madigan? And so in this case, putting aside whatever political ambitions Chuy Garcia may want to get out of an endorsement, the purpose is to drive up the Madigan vote so high that Rauner cannot claim it as a victory, as a sign that there is support in Chicago for making the public schools go bankrupt. So when I put it to you that way, would you vote for Mike Madigan or would you vote for Jason Gonzalez if you lived in that district?
So one, I want to point out, going back to pretending I'm Bernie Sanders, that Bruce Rauner wouldn't be possible in a world where neoliberals like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Rahm Emanuel were the leadership of the party. Right? That is how far right we have gone. That is how much we have abandoned our core democratic principles. That Bruce Rauner is now the leading voice in the Republican Party. So I just want to point that out. But that said, if I lived in Mike Madigan's district at this moment in time, absolutely, I would vote for Mike Madigan in a second over Jason Gonzalez, because the reality is that as many bad things as he has done, he is the one that is protecting working people at this moment in time. And so it's realpolitik. It's realpolitik. And so for right now, I'm with Mike Madigan.
Alderman Moore.
Well, I've always been a supporter of the speaker. What I have not been a supporter of are rubber stamp legislators. And so you need a person like Speaker Madigan that can get things done down there. People, they relinquish their own power. And I'm when we got into the city council, that could have easily happened to either one of us. And I've seen it already happen to some freshman aldermen. No one even asked you to give up your power. They just automatically give it up. They give the power of the people. I have no power, but I have 55,000 people that is better than something else in the Inglewood, Auburn, Gresham community. And so as long as I know that I have them, and if I stand and fight for them, no matter what, I'll be honest with you, I wanted to, because the realistic part is it, I wanted to vote for higher tax increase that the mayor presented in the budget, because realistically, we needed it. Over years, we went on vacation with raising taxes in the past administration. But we have to pay our bills. But guess what my people and my residents didn't want? They said, David, do not vote for that garbage fee. I do not want that garbage fee. You vote for that garbage fee. So I asked, you all need to separate this out. Take it out. No, we're tying it together. Then I would not be voting for it. Why? Because the people said it. And you have to roll with the people every day of the week. And so when we look at Michael Madigan, you're looking at a strong leader, but the problem is is not the Mike Madigan. It's the legislators down there who's given up the power of the people. And you can never sacrifice the power of the people.
Okay, let's do one more question about the actual presidential race, and then we're going to go to closing statements. And I'm going to sort of change the question a little bit. It's about gun control, and so I'm going to ask you guys, what is your candidate's what in your candidate's position on gun control will help the city of Chicago with its problems with gun violence? Probably don't have to tell anybody here that. I'm always skeptical of these. Last year in this month, we had this crime, these crime numbers, and this year, this month, we have these because it's a short snapshot. Now, that said, there have been 100 people already murdered in Chicago this year. That's a striking number. People around the country are astounded and horrified. People here, of course, are not just horrified, but it's affecting their lives. What, in your candidates' policies on violent crime and guns specifically, will do something to help the city of Chicago?
Well, first of all, Hillary Clinton has always fought against the gun lobbyists. She's fought for stronger gun laws, and she will continue to do that. Bernie in Vermont, because he said, well, I have to go with my constituents. But when you're looking at it at a national level versus on a local level, these policies for guns hurt people that he has supported in the past. And so you have to go after the big gun manufacturers, as Hillary has done, will continue to do, and hold them accountable for making sure that we're able to not get through the loopholes that we doing the national background checks, so that these guns will not get through, so you can get through to places like Chicago. Because if you don't have it nationally, all I have to do is go over to Indiana. All I have to do is drive to St. Louis. All I have to do is drive to Minnesota or somewhere and pick up a gun, and then, or Mississippi, and bring it right back to Chicago. So we have to have a national database. We have to have a national registry. And Hillary Clinton it has always supported this and will continue to support it.
So, as I understand it, at this moment in time, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have a very similar platform when it comes to gun control. Yes, Bernie had some bad stances in the past when it came to gun control that I didn't agree with. But at the end of the day, we've forgiven Clinton for so many things. I would hope that we would forgive Sanders in this one instance of inconsistency on his platform. But that said, I think that moving beyond the platform that Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders share on gun control, which is very, very similar, the best way to stop gun violence is to rebuild the American middle class and to lift tens and tens of millions of people out of poverty. And Bernie Sanders is the best candidate to do that, because he's going to fight Wall Street and the big banks and the corporations, just like he's fought them his entire career. He is going to make sure that we have a $15 minimum wage, not a $12 minimum wage. He is going to stand up and make sure that if you are working 40 hours per week, that you are not living in poverty. And so when it comes to Bernie Sanders' economic platform in terms of ensuring health care, in terms of ensuring access to higher education, in terms of ensuring a dignified salary with union contract and benefits, he is the best candidate to stop gun violence. Because if we're just focusing on, well, guns are coming from Indiana, well, then we should say, let's build a wall with Indiana and have them pay for it. But the reality is that
Donald Trump may propose that next. So,
but we have to lift people out of poverty, and that's exactly what Bernie Sanders will set out to do. And he's going to bring the people power. He's going to bring his strong voice and advocacy, and he's going to be a really strong advocate for working people, and that's why I support him.
All right, thank you. Well, you guys, tell us one more time, and let's keep this one short. Let's keep this one to a minute. We've gone over a bit. Our digressions on we couldn't resist Rom Rauner, Mike Madigan. But so tell us in a minute, if you can, why again your candidate is the one we should go with. I forgot who went first initially. Carlos, you went first initially, I believe so. So, David, why don't you go first?
Again, don't make politics, but first of all, public service more complicated than what it is. It's about you. It's about your everyday life. It's simple. It's about the foundation. You look at Trump's foundation. Look at how you started out and you worked hard to build your families, to work, versus someone that was handed $3 million. give me $3 million, I'll be a multimillionaire today as well. And so it's about the foundation of where you come from and how you've worked in life. And Hillary has been that fighter for years. And so all her life, again, since she was in high school, when she met Dr. King, when that changed the trajectory of her life, when she began to fight for the least of them, when she began to fight against injustices, those things she would carry on. You may waver sometimes, and nothing or no one is perfect. I don't think there's a perfect candidate, and I don't think there's a perfect person. But what brings you back is your foundation. And what I'm concerned about is when that foundation isn't solid, when there's a chance and an opportunity to do the right thing, whether it's with gun control or whether you have to listen to Dr. King and you choose to go to Vermont, those are issues that becomes important to me. What's the foundation? And I think Hillary's foundation is solid, and that is what she will continue to build on. The relationships that she's gained with people throughout all areas, all sides, all backgrounds is important. That's how you move America forward. America just isn't black. America just isn't white. America just isn't Latino. America is a melting pot of all of that, and she has that ability to move America forward.
All right. Thank you. Carlos, like I said, 2 minutes.
Sure. So, Alderman Moore put it very succinctly. It's about your everyday life. And Bernie Sanders is the best candidate to ensure that our everyday life improves for everyone in this country. Because at this moment in time, it's only improving for the super rich and wealthy. And if we have Hillary Clinton, the same policies that she championed in the 90s as she championed in the 2000s are the same policies she's going to continue championing in the White House. Policies that ensure that the rich and powerful continue to have their insider connections and deals, and the rest of us are left out. And so Bernie is the candidate of change. Bernie is the candidate of Yes, We Can. He builds upon the platform of President Barack Obama and says, we're going to go a step further. We're going to make sure that healthcare is a human right. We're going to make sure that millions of young people across this country have access to higher education, which they deserve because it's a human right. He's going to make sure that people have dignified wages and that they have an opportunity to join a union and fight back against unfair employers. So Bernie has the vision of a future we can believe in. And that is why I and millions of others millennials across this country aren't just voting for him, but we're giving of our time, we're giving of our dollars, the very few dollars that we have. So I want to say that ultimately he has the best vision, the best future for this country. Additionally, he's the most electable, right? Because we have to look back at that data, right? What does the data tell us? The polls tell us he's most electable. The number of people that are contributing to his campaign and engaging in his campaign. He's brought to you by the people, not billionaires or super PACs. And the only reason why this wily-eyed, crazy-haired, old Jewish man from New York that ran for office in Vermont is currently in play is because people decided that he needed to be in play in this contest, not billionaires, not super PACs. So he's the most electable candidate. And lastly, effectiveness, right? That's what Hillary has hung her whole campaign on. I'm most effective. But to this day, we do not know, other than her saying I'm more effective, why she says that. Because if we look at the track record, he's passed more bills, he's gotten more things through. And he's not just saying, look, guys, I'm going to work with this crazy Republican Senate and push forward this neoliberal agenda that we can push forward at this moment in time. He's saying, I'm going to bring the people into government. And he's done that already with his campaign. Empowering activists from Black Lives Matter, empowering undocumented leaders from across this country to not just be in the room, but to actually write the platform, right? To be the leaders that they need to be. So that's what really excites me about him is this is going to be a transformational presidency under Bernie Sanders, and that's exactly what we needed at this moment in time to address the crisis that our nation is in.
Thank you. Let's please offer another round of applause to the aldermen. They're very busy. They took time out to prepare for this, to come here. Carlos and David, thank you very, very much. Ben, there is one other question that was presented to you and I. When will you and Ben endorse Bernie Sanders for president?
Well, I kind of did last week. I guess the person who missed that column sort of. I said I was feeling the burn, but I don't know, Mick. What have I ever gotten around to endorsing people? I always feel like if I endorse someone, they lose. So
Yeah.
I'm just staying out of endorsing people. Although I may endorse Michael Madigan, which is so bizarre. That article, I was really. That's why I asked these guys what they thought. So I'll steal their ideas and pretend they're mine. So anyway, you guys don't want me to endorse Bernie Sanders. Trust me.
There you go.
And if I can add to that, I really need to leave you all with this. A lot of people tend to come out in droves when there's a presidential election. Local politics is so important.
That's true. That's true.
Who you support locally, and that's if when you're looking at whether it's a Mark Kirk or whether it's a Jan Jakowski or anybody else that's running, you have to pay attention. What are those people going to do when they really get there? Because when it matters, no matter who's at the head, if those people are not moving for you, it cannot be effective. And so we could possibly elect the Bernie Sanders if you had people that will move in that direction. But you don't want a government that's constantly tied up with what we have in Illinois, regardless of who's at the head, if for years you've had rubber stamp people that don't know how to support the people. Focus on local politics more.
That's true.
All right, thank you. It's a great way for us to wrap up. Thanks to all you guys for coming out on a nice winter night on the 1st of March. And yes, we know you guys participate. Please keep doing so, and we hope to see you again next month. We would be remiss if we didn't mention we have a website that we're still building, right? First Tuesday, Chicago, and we're posting all of our shows there. So please check it out. And see you again next month, guys. Thanks a lot.